Recording in progress.
Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Scio Township Planning Commission for June 14th, 2021. We are using the Zoom platform. For members of the public who have joined us by video or phone, your microphones are muted but will be opened when appropriate. In order to minimize disruptions to the meeting and connectivity problems, only members of the board, council, commission and presenters will have video. Applicants and staff will have video access, but have been asked to turn off their cameras until called upon. At that time, they may use the share screen capabilities if appropriate. All chat and question and answer boxes have been disabled, I hope. The meeting is being held via video conference in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. All members of the public body and members of the public participating electronically will be considered present at the meeting and may participate as a physically present. All members of the Planning Commission are participating from Scio Township, Washtenaw County, Michigan. And if members of the body, not applicants or staff, are participating from elsewhere, they need to say so, identifying the county, municipality, and state. There will be an opportunity for the public to speak during public comment, and instructions for public comment will be provided at that time. So I will call the meeting to order at 7:01. Secretary Cheng, could we have our roll call, please?
Yes. Commissioner Holland.
Present, Dexter Township, Washtenaw County, Michigan.
Commissioner Moore.
Present, Scio Township, Washtenaw County, Michigan.
Commissioner Sharma.
Present, Scio Township, Washtenaw County, Michigan.
Commissioner Courteau.
Present in Scio Township, Washtenaw County, Michigan.
Commissioner Hyde.
Present, Scio Township, Washtenaw County, Michigan.
Cheng, present, Scio Township, Washtenaw County, Michigan, and Culbertson.
Present, Scio Township, Washtenaw County, Michigan.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next is the adoption of the agenda. Are there any additions, revisions to the agenda? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as posted. Commissioner Hyde, is there support?
Second, support. Second.
Okay, so support by Commissioner Sharma. Any discussion? All right, may I have a roll call vote? Secretary Cheng.
Okay. Holland.
Yes.
Moore.
Yes.
Sharma.
Yes.
Courteau.
Yes.
Hyde.
Yes.
Cheng, yes. Culbertson.
Yes.
All right, approved.
Great. Communications and correspondence. There have been 2 items of correspondence regarding the master plan that have been forwarded to commissioner members. We will probably discuss those briefly at our next meeting when Doug is back with us and kind of decide, what the process will be moving forward as we get feedback and so forth on the master plan. Has anyone else received any additional correspondence? Okay, seeing none. Then presentations requested by the Planning Commission. We have 2 presentations this evening. The first one is from Sally Oye. She's a professor of the U of M of Astronomy at the University of Michigan and coordinator of Dark Skies Michigan Dark Skies. And the second will be from Scott Miller, who is the Deputy Water Resources Commissioner at Washtenaw County Stormwater Management Group. So with that, I want to welcome Sally. And if you'd like to give any more introductions of yourself, you may. And if not, go ahead and share your screen and take it away.
Well, thank you very much. Let me figure out which screen to share here. Is that working?
Yep.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I am the coordinator of a group called Michigan Dark Skies, as Jan mentioned, and we are a community coalition that has members from a wide variety of organizations, some of which you can see mentioned here. We have at least 200 people in our group, and the vast majority of them are here in Washtenaw County. So I am going to be presenting tonight on the topic of light pollution and the context for the existing Scio Township lighting ordinance, which has become of interest lately with respect to the new roundabouts that the county is building, for example, the one at Miller and Wagner, which is already operational. I do also want to call out the International Dark Sky Association. They have provided some of the material that I'm going to show you, and they are the premier organization that advocates for dark skies and preserving the natural environment. So what you're seeing here in this slide is hopefully a view of the sky that many of you are familiar with, and that areas of Scio Township do have places where you can see the Milky Way. And that is the more or less natural state of the night sky. And if you see that, then you are very lucky indeed, because the majority of people, about 80% of people, actually live in an environment where you cannot see the Milky Way and where the night sky looks more like this. And a lot of this lighting that you see here, and this is Detroit, is necessary, it is useful, and some of it is beautiful. But a lot of it also is not. And light that is wasted and performs no function or task is light pollution. That's the definition of light pollution. It is wasted energy because light is a form of energy, so it's directly a form of wasted energy. So all of this light that you can see that's flying right into space is an example of that, because it is performing no function or task. It is literally a vast amount of wasted energy. And light pollution is a problem that is increasing at an exponential rate, about 6% per year, according to this study. It does vary from place to place. There's some places where it is increasing at a rate of up to 20% a year. And here you can see a map of the US in light pollution from the late 1950s, 1997, and then this map of Michigan's light pollution is about from 3 years old or so. And you can see the Ann Arbor area does have its distinctive thumbprint here. And the regions that are in red are something like 10 to 30 times higher light levels in the sky than what is normal. And so the yellow regions are more like 2 to 3 times higher than normal. But one of the things that you do see here is that there are still areas, even in the lower peninsula of Michigan, where there are pristine dark skies, and even more so, of course, in the upper peninsula. And so that is a large part for the basis of there actually being a substantial dark sky movement here in our state. So why is this a problem? Light pollution actually has a profound impact on the natural environment, wildlife, and as well, human health, as we're finding out more and more. In fact, in 2017, the Nobel Prize in Medicine was awarded for discoveries relating to the circadian rhythms. So we, as with other creatures, are operating on a 24-hour light and dark cycle. And so when that gets disrupted by artificial light at night, or ALAN, as the biologists call it, then that starts causing problems. And one of the more famous examples are birds. Birds are known to migrate at night frequently for many different species, and they navigate by the light of the moon and stars. And so they get very confused when they see artificial lights, and they end up colliding with buildings, which are the #2 cause of bird death. And it's believed to up to 1 billion birds annually are killed by colliding with buildings, which is absolutely mind-boggling. So there's a lot of awareness about that in our area. In particular, we're on the Great Lakes Highway of bird migration, I'm told. And so there are people here in Washtenaw County, as well as Detroit Audubon, who have been working to try to mitigate light pollution and to have lights out campaigns. And that also applies to other areas on the Great Lakes. because of this migration route. And here's just an example of one bird kill from one building in Ypsilanti during the bird migration season a few years ago. Birds are not the only creature. There are many, many others that are affected by light pollution. And you may have heard about the insect apocalypse recently. Insects have also been suffering negative effects because of light pollution, and there's been a decrease in insect population on the order of 25% or some huge number on that order over the last 50 years or so, that has now been positively linked to being caused at least in part by light pollution as well. And that's very frightening indeed, because insects are the bottom of the food chain. We rely on them as well for pollinating our crops, and even ones that aren't active at night, their larvae are vulnerable when their nighttime environment is exposed to light, and their predators are then able to eat them. And then there are other larger species that are economically viable, like fish, including salmon, and many other animals that are also affected. So it's really a fundamental change to the environment, because there's a whole nocturnal ecosystem that is basically being eroded right now. So humans, of course, are also a creature that is subject to the circadian rhythms. And the American Medical Association has felt so strongly about the effects of light pollution that they've put out a whole report on light pollution and its effects on health. And this, again, it has to do with the sleep disruptions, which have been linked to cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and obesity, among other things. There's also a second problem, which is disability glare. So if you're out and about at night and you suddenly encounter glare, for example, car headlights that aren't dimmed, then that's clearly a safety problem. And that is a significant risk to people's health as well, of course. As well, certain wavelengths of light have also been linked to damage to the eyes. So that's a health problem. And there are 3 different types of light pollution. We've talked about glare here just now. Another one is light trespass, and that refers to when you have light that's going, for example, from the neighbor's house right into your bedroom, and you can't sleep at night. That is an example of light trespass. It's going someplace where it's not intended to go and not wanted. So you always want lights to be shielded so that it doesn't go and cause a nuisance next door. You've also got sky glow, and that's the artificial brightening of the night sky that's literally turning night into day. So those are the 3 types of light pollution that we have. And lighting is often put out there for safety reasons, but there are also a lot of misperceptions about that. More light is not necessarily safer. What happens is that if you have too bright light, then it will cause shadows, and you have glare. Again, once again, we've talked about that. And then night vision also gets compromised when you're going from a dark region into, when you're going from a bright region into a dark region, then your eyes are no longer dark adapted. And finally, you can also target areas for crime when you light them up, because lighting helps everybody, not just the good guys, but also the bad guys. So here is an illustration of an example where you can see a very brightly lit complex, and you can see a person standing there with all of this lighting here. So you think, okay, this feels safe. We've got lots of good lighting. Here is the same scene once again without the person. However, the person is actually still in this picture. So perhaps you could take a careful look and see if you can spot where that person is located now. And if you're having some trouble, then this is illustrating that, in fact, this lighting scenario is perhaps not as ideal as it originally seemed, in spite of the fact that it is so bright that it is lighting up the trees. So I don't know if you've managed to spot where that person is located, but that person used to be here. And now the person is actually in the shadows over here and not illuminated. So you can see the visibility is actually not what you might have hoped that it would be. So more light is not necessarily safer. Here we can see some dramatic examples with glare. So we have over here a completely glare dominated field. And then if the light is properly shielded, you can actually see much more clearly. Same thing on the left here, glare dominated over there. And then when you block that light out and shield it appropriately, you can actually see that there's a person standing there. If you look at illumination levels, once again, too bright is not very helpful. And this is again relevant to the new roundabouts that are being built. If you go into a region where you have very, very bright lights, we see service stations all the time, then it will take a while, 15 to 20 minutes, for you to fully recover your dark adaptation. And there's really no reason why it needs to be that bright as day. Our eyes are perfectly capable of managing with a modest amount of light rather than a completely daylight adapted light level. And I would just mention that this is something that people do care about here in Michigan. We have a variety of dark sky parks. I think I won't go into too much detail about this. I think I'm running a little later than I planned. But we basically have a whole bunch of dark sky parks that have been assigned by the state of Michigan in addition to the International Dark Sky Association, which is quite a surprise because most states do not have that kind of dark sky park system. So this is something that people in Michigan definitely care about. So the solutions are very easy. All you have to do is light only what is needed. So keep your targets focused, keep the light on your target, no more than needed with respect to the illumination levels, the brightness. Light only when you need it, so turn the lights off when they're not needed, and no bluer than needed. It turns out that these LED lights that are very popular now actually have by default a lot of blue light in them. You can see the difference between cool white and warm white. And we strongly recommend the warm whites. Those are not as impactful to destroying one's night vision. They don't cause as much glare, they don't cause as much scattering, and they're much more natural. So no bluer than needed. Warm whites are strongly preferred. And so the Scio lighting ordinance is very good at these first two right here. The ordinance was actually passed quite a long time ago. In 2003. So really you can be commended at having a fairly comprehensive lighting ordinance for quite some time. So pretty much ahead of the curve there. I'll go through the components of it here. These are exactly in the order that it's presented in the ordinance. It starts out by calling out specifically glare and trespass and these four different items. Ultraviolet light, glare, trespass from vehicle headlights, nuisance glare, including heat, which is infrared light, nuisance glare from doors. Those things are all specifically called out to begin with, that there shall be no glare beyond the property light from such sources. Now, the principal way to control light pollution is by shielding the fixtures, the light fixtures themselves. Ideally, you don't want any light going above the horizontal plane. And so the term that's usually used for that is fully shielded. It means there's no light going above 90 degrees from the vertical as measured from the bottom like this. So that's fully shielded. Another term that's frequently used is full cutoff shielding, and that refers to the green area that you see here. That means no light emerging above 80 degrees from the vertical measured from the bottom. So that's this green region right here. You'll see both terms used in various applications, and one of them is used here. So this is the nuts and bolts of the Scio lighting ordinance. It's the part about exterior lighting. It starts by talking about the goals, which is to minimize lighting on, through considerations of nuisance, safety, and the rural character of the township. Secondly, the site plans must show photometric compliance. And third, only non-glare color-corrected lighting. I'm really not sure what that means. That is a bit vague. Maybe this term is defined someplace else, but I'm not quite sure what that's supposed to mean and can be interpreted in a variety of ways. For non-residential applications, full cutoff shielding is required. So that's where, when we're on this slide, this is the full cutoff. It's the green one, the one that's a little bit more stringent. And then wall packs are specifically prohibited. There's also a clause here for a pretty standard light trespass limit of 0.1 foot candles at residential property lines and 0.3 foot candles for non-residential. In addition, there's also a limit to the maximum illumination underneath a fixture being 25 foot candles and between fixtures no greater than 3 foot candles. And then there's also limits in parking lots to the pole height for lighting fixtures, depending on how many spaces you've got. And then illuminated signs also must comply with these rules. And furthermore, there will be no signs illuminated in residential districts. 7, no building or roof mounted lights except for security. And then finally, no street lighting in subdivisions or condominium complexes. The Planning Commission may recommend exceptions to the Township Board on the basis of demonstrated need. That's a summary of the Scio lighting ordinance. It's quite comprehensive, as you can see. There are a couple areas where it doesn't seem to cover things as strongly, and that can be seen in comparison with the draft Ann Arbor lighting ordinance. We are ready to send this to the City Council. In fact, we've been waiting for almost a year now just to get it on the agenda. But this is the summary of items that the Ann Arbor lighting ordinance has. And what it does have that the Scio doesn't have is the warm colors, unless that clause that I mentioned that was a little bit vague applies to this. And then the curfews. So Ann Arbor's lighting ordinance does also recommend having a curfew on lighting, that they should be turned off when the business is closed. So I'll just end here by showing you this graph, which is the price of lighting here and the dotted line compared to the per capita consumption of lighting starting from the year 1700 to the year 2000 in the UK. And the study ended in 2000, or the data ended in 2000. But basically what you can see is that as the price of lighting decreases, the per capita consumption of lighting increases exactly in lockstep. So unfortunately, as lighting gets cheaper, it does not simply mean that people are going to be lighting less. They will actually be lighting more. This is a phenomenon that is known as the Jevons paradox, which relates specifically to energy consumption in general, but it clearly also applies to lighting, which is a form of energy. And that's why legislation is absolutely imperative to realize these conservation opportunities and realize our goals to prevent the negative impacts of light pollution. So to summarize, light pollution is an exponentially growing threat to safety, health, and the environment. And Scio Township does have a comprehensive lighting ordinance, but enforcement is needed to accomplish goals. I'm just putting here, name dropping a couple campaigns in our state that have very actively been promoting dark skies as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sally. And I'll just ask if any commissioners have any questions on the presentation. And perhaps stop sharing so
Okay.
everybody, that'd be great. All right, questions? Commissioner Holland.
In the service station lighting example, was that the first one was this, let's say, was the second one fully shielded or full cutoff, or what was that?
Right, that was both. Let me just show you. So what we had here was, I can show you that again. This was, you can still see it even though it's in this mode, right? So this is an example where you have the lights actually recessed into the ceiling of that canopy. So that would certainly qualify as both fully shielded and full cutoff. In fact, it's even more stringent than either of those because you can see that the light will not get any higher than some angle that's even less than 80 degrees from the vertical.
And energy use wise, are they about the same, or do you think the second example is less?
Well, the second example definitely is a lower lighting level. So yes, it would consume less energy.
So the other question I had is, in your initial example, the initial maps, how much of the light pollution was attributed to auto vehicles and headlights?
I do not offhand know, but I don't think it's a lot. I think most of the light pollution that we see here is from buildings and scattered light that comes off of the pavement and surfaces like that, as well as from cloud cover as well. I mean, that has a tendency to scatter things. But I do not actually know exactly how much comes from cars and how much comes from buildings.
Thank you. I have another question regarding you're probably familiar with outside protective lights that DTE provides or not?
I have not heard that term. Can you explain?
DTE will put up a pole light and bill a homeowner a monthly fee for maintenance and electricity for that light. And I've been I really don't like, they typically put up the least expensive type of lighting. Quite often it's an obnoxious type of light, doesn't have cutoffs, and just wondered if you knew anything about it, how we could maybe have that handled in the township as far as what type of fixture, instead of just getting the cheapest fixture. Some people are concerned about their safety in their country property or their farm or their barn or whatever, and they'll have what's called an OPL, outside protective light. And it'd be nice to have one that's like 2,700 instead of 4,000 or 5,000 K. But
right, I think the most important thing is shielding once again. So I can't comment on the cost. When I say one is cheaper than another, different designs of lights they come in all kinds of different shapes and sizes and costs. So there's good lights that are expensive, and there's good lights that are cheap, and there's bad lights that are expensive, and there's bad lights that are cheap. I do know that DTE will shield things for you if you don't like what they're doing. I definitely know that if you complain about the light trespass or the glare or whatever, they will definitely. Or I know that people I know have had success simply asking them to fix that. But yeah, for this kind of lighting, if you could also consider using the 3,000 degree color temperature or less, that would be the warm white lighting.
nice presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other commissioner questions? Commissioner Sharma.
Hi, great presentation, by the way. I learned a lot about light in just a few minutes, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
A few different questions. First of all, how does Scio Township compare in terms of light pollution with similar sized towns or cities or townships?
It really all just depends on where you are in relation to an urban area. So Scio Township is right next to Ann Arbor. You can see that Ann Arbor is already pretty red. Ann Arbor's next to Detroit, which is even worse. So I think you can just look at the map of Michigan here and say, okay, well, here's a township here. Here are townships up here that are really doing just fine. And Scio's actually not that great because it's right next to Ann Arbor. On the other hand, sorry?
Are we red or yellow there?
I think you're both. I think you're right in the red and yellow transition zone. So that would be lighting levels that are on the order of 3 times higher than normal night sky brightness or something like that. But, it could be worse, obviously.
I see. I found your statements about safety in comparison to the magnitude of lighting. I mean, and how more lighting doesn't mean necessarily more safety. I also saw what you said about the ordinance around lighting in subdivisions and so on. I think it may be appropriate to state that sometimes this kind of lighting does help pedestrians in a subdivision. Would you not think so? And an ordinance of that kind perhaps sometimes can endanger lives. I see that in my subdivision all the time. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I find it interesting that it's all dark in my subdivision and elsewhere. So isn't that kind of counterproductive?
It all depends on the application. Yes, absolutely. If there are a lot of pedestrians out at night, then certainly you would want some lighting for them. Yes. I hope I didn't suggest otherwise.
Right. No, you did not. You did not. I just thought. And my last question is, there are a lot of options in terms of recessed lighting, shielded lighting, and so on and so forth. Yet in your example, you show a gas station that is using it or not using it. Why does this happen? I mean, is the amount of light is the same, the impact is the same? Is it because people do not know what to install? Are the contractors at fault? I mean, why is this happening if the options are there and the awareness is there?
I think you're exactly right. I think the awareness is not there. I think most people just don't think about it. It's lighting is so inexpensive compared to some things that, you just don't really think about leaving the lights on sometimes. Yet you wouldn't leave the sink, the faucet in the sink on, would you? Right. So it's a matter of raising awareness and just letting people realize that there are negative impacts. We are very much a daytime species, right? We are evolved to be active during the day. And so when we're active, we want our environment to be like it is during the day. And I think that's kind of where everything stems from. I mean, when you have more light, you do see better. That's not to say that you can't see what you need to see with slightly lower levels of lighting. And our biology does allow that. Our eyes can adapt to lower levels of lighting, but we still feel more comfortable from a psychological standpoint when the light is like day because we are adapted. We're a species that is active during the day.
I see. Great, thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Courteau.
Thank you. Again, I really appreciate your presentation. That was very clear and helpful. I've long been I tried to go to the International Dark Sky Park and it was totally cloudy, so I didn't get the full experience. But I had two questions. One is the curfew and how that's enforced. Was Ann Arbor not? I thought at one point they were trying some kind of either timed or sensor that lights that were responding to pedestrian activity, or are there other way, or just put things on a timer? What do people use for that curfew?
Right, so you mentioned a couple different things. First of all, the Ann Arbor lighting ordinance currently is still a draft. We still have not gotten it in front of the city council yet because they're so backed up. But what is in the actual ordinance for Ann Arbor is a curfew that specifies that after the business is closed, the exterior lighting shall be turned off within 30 minutes, I believe. And unless there is some safety lighting that needs to be on as well. But basically the main exterior lights will be off after 30 minutes. You also mentioned what's called adaptive lighting, which is becoming more and more of a thing. So there are technologies being developed now where even on roads, the lights will turn on when the car approaches, but otherwise be off. And I think lights like that also exist for pedestrian walkways in some places as well. But that's not something that we have in the Ann Arbor ordinance right now. It's something to keep an eye on because if you want to update your ordinance, it does have those areas that I pointed out that could use some updating. And I think it's maybe a little too early at this stage to be doing adaptive light controls of the kind that I just mentioned, but it's something that we in Ann Arbor are keeping an eye on and would, if that technology becomes viable and cost effective, then that's certainly something that we would be interested in updating the ordinance with.
Thank you. And my second question was about enforcement. And maybe this is actually, it's partly you and partly Chair Culbertson. I mean, what do we do when we have organizations like the Washtenaw County Road Commission not following our own ordinance? I mean, what are the levers that we have for better enforcement?
Yeah, and it is true that the township is working with the road commission on their lighting standards, specifically around the roundabouts, and trying to get some sort of commitment, because there are ANSI roadway lighting standards that could be followed. So that's a part of the discussions that the supervisor is having with the County Road Commission at this time. And I would just encourage commissioners to go to the International Dark Sky Association website. They have 5 really good principles on exterior lighting. And this was sort of an overview, you know, as we go into master planning and looking at our ordinance and so forth, just, you know, touching base and an awareness, and perhaps there's some opportunities for education around, you know, with the environmental task force, because one of the things the ordinance doesn't do, and most ordinances don't touch on residential lighting. And I know when I looked at the lights that I have on my house, I spotted one that isn't shielded. And so, you know, that's another thing to do too, is to really look at raising the awareness within the community. So thank you very much. And we do have one other presentation tonight, so I want to make sure we get a chance to move along. Any other comments that people want to make or questions?
Madam Chair, there's actually a comment from Evan Pratt that he typed in. Would you like to hear that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he says, my understanding of safety is the contrast is the issue. Very bright light sources create greater contrast, which counterintuitively causes the problem. So the peak foot candle and minimal variability are keys to safely regulating. And I would totally agree with that. I'm sure, yeah, Sally's nodding her head as well. Yeah. So I think this is just something that really needs awareness to be raised in the community. And as we look at ordinances, there may be some things that we can continue to, you know, one, ask questions of the site plans that come through, and also look at our ordinance as we're reviewing that. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I also want to take the opportunity to thank the township and to thank you, Chair Culbertson, for all your efforts with your help on the roundabout issue. And we do also have our own website, the Michigan Dark Skies website, that I have on my slides that you also have. So we have some Michigan specific information.
Great. Thank you for adding that too. All right. Great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Enjoy your evening. And next up is, there have been quite a few questions around stormwater management. And so I'd like to introduce Scott Miller, and he's our Deputy Water Resources Commissioner, because I guess you're on vacation, but here, and, and the commissioner is elsewhere on vacation. So welcome, Scott. It's nice to meet you, and go ahead and if you want to share your screen and add to the introduction, that would be great.
Right, well, thank you. Yeah, as you mentioned, Jan, I'm the Deputy Water Resources Commissioner. You did hear from Evan Pratt, the comment there. He is, in fact, out of the county. It's actually a little coincidental, because this is the subject when you contacted us about talking about the rules, and then maybe tying that to the rainfall patterns, climate change, et cetera. It's something really near and dear to the office, and certainly Evan's heart. I know in about a month and a half, he'll be at a national conference presenting on that subject itself. So it would have been a great presentation to have tonight, but it's not quite prepared yet. I did pull out a presentation that I did a couple of years ago. I think there's some chunks of it that are very, very apropos to our rules and how it ties to climate change. Actually, when I did it, it was about an hour. I got the impression that wasn't quite what we were looking for tonight. So I'm going to kind of hopscotch through some of the highlights to try to keep it down to 10, 15 minutes, and certainly leave, any time for questions that kind of direct what you'd like to talk to us about. So I think I got something here, correct? Is that?
Not yet. You may have to, yeah.
There it is, share.
You got it.
Okay. So this is something I presented a couple of years ago in relation to our rules. So the latest major revision to our rules was done in 2014. And in fact, it did partly was done in regards to the climate change and to the changing rainfall patterns. So I'd love to go through all of it, but I will start with a little bit of a recent history of our rules, and talk more specifically about what we're doing today. So one of the kind of going back, and I still consider this recent times. I was around anyway, I was alive. So back in the late 70s, our rules were almost exclusively about flood control at the time. Climate change, changing rainfall patterns certainly weren't something that was a topic of conversation in the office. Water quality, the pollutants, sediments, etc. Again, not as it was sort of a minor component. But back then, we really were focused on flood control. How do we keep our properties from flooding, and how do we keep our structures safe? So I'm not going to go into the in-depth parts of what we did back then, but one thing that I thought was really relevant was the last bullet point here was back in 1979. So we're talking around 40 years ago. What we termed the 100-year storm event, or a storm that you would have a 1% chance in any 1 year of experiencing, was defined through the charts as 3.64 inches over, and that would be in a 24-hour period. So, and I think it's important to remember these storm events too, they're sort of defined as if you're getting a steady rainfall for a 24-hour period, so that 3.64 inches, for example, would accumulate over a 24-hour period, which is certainly not something we experience as much now. I think everyone sees now we have much more intense cloudburst type events where you get a couple inches in a couple hours versus a long steady rainfall. But our thoughts on the rain events and storm events has certainly been evolving over the time. Again, so just some more revisions over the years. We changed the rules, revised them up back in 1989. Again, flood-based, flood control-based type of rules. I think it was 1994 where we specifically started thinking beyond that. That's where we started talking about water quality, and we started thinking about storms, not so much how do you keep everything from flooding in a really bad event, but how do you manage your streams, your lakes, your water, your conveyances over the various storms, the frequent storms. So in 94 was the first time we defined 3 events instead of just the 100-year event. We had the first flush, which was sort of, at the time, it was considered a half inch of rainfall, but it was considered a common storm that you would get a couple times a year, kind of flush off the water off all that impervious surface. And that's where a lot of the sediment and the pollutant loads were coming from. So we defined that back in 94 as a way to address how do we manage the water quality aspect of it. And then we also defined something called a bank full, At the time, it was considered a 1.5-year storm. But again, just sort of roughly speaking, that was considered to be a storm that would, if you had an open channel or a creek or a river or a stream, that was a storm that would fill the river up to its top of its banks, right before it overflowed out of its banks. And then we still, of course, managed the 100-year storm. I note this, and I noted it back in my presentation then, infiltration was noted back in 1994 in the rules, but they weren't encouraged. And in fact, they weren't permitted. So if you wanted to do that, I don't think people were looking to do it back then, but you were not allowed to infiltrate under our rules back in the early 90s. So, we had a slight change in 1996. This is right around the time where I kind of came on the scene for the county. Ratcheted down the maximum discharge rate. So again, this was a response to the flooding issues. So we were reducing how the rates and velocities and intensities that you could discharge from the site. I think that led us to 2000. I mentioned this date more than anything because it was the first time that we allowed infiltration. So we didn't really have a way to quantify it or a way to define how it should be the standard should be set for it. But we did allow it up to a 1/2 inch of runoff. You could infiltrate on your site. On A and B soils, which if you're familiar with soil series at all, those are the sandier soils, the soils that are more amenable for water to infiltrate through it. So I will say I was with the Water Resources or the Drain Commissioner, Janice Bobburn, back at the time when this was instituted. I can confidently tell you that I do not recall any instances of any owner or developer proposing to do infiltration in this era from 2000 up till 2014. So I don't recall it happening once. So, but to get to the reason we're really here this evening, it was the 2014 rules. This was a big revision for us, a lot of changes. One thing, and I kind of want to step back and talk about it as far as it related to climate change and resiliency, is we always rely on rainfall data, rainfall tables, etc., to figure out what kind of storms we're going to get in the future. And the issue that we deal with and that we confront even now is the rainfall data. We get decades worth of data, which is great to have, but it's data in the past. So we look at when they come out with these charts to say, well, what's a 100-year storm? What's a first flush storm, etc. They're based on rainfall event that is decades old. And I think a lot of us recognize now that the rainfall patterns have been changing over the last several decades, and the tables we use may not be accurately reflecting what we're trying to do. So one of the ideas that we implemented was try to create some resiliency to recognize that, hey, the rainfall data that we're relying on probably is not going to be accurate going forward. And as you might see on the page here, the rainfall for a 100-year 24-hour storm as defined in 2014 under the Atlas 14 data tables, if you're into that, is now 5.11 inch. So what everyone always suspects, it's never rained this much in the 30 years I've been here. It's never flooded like this in the 20 years that I've been here. It's probably true to some extent that the 100-year rain event went from 3¼ inch to over 5 inches in a 40-year period. And it's continuing to go up. The data and the charts indicate the trends are these numbers are going to go up. And the rains are different. As I mentioned, they're becoming more frequent. They're becoming more intense. So now we don't get 5 inches of rain over 24 hours. Now when we get these type of rainfalls, there's a lot of places that are getting 5, 6, 7 inches of rain over a 2 or 3 or 4 hour window. And that dynamic really makes it difficult to perform flood control. So this, how we tried to address that and how we tried to build resiliency into that was we went from infiltration being allowed and encouraged to now it's mandate. So in Washtenaw County, you are mandated to infiltrate the first flush volume, or another standard is the difference in a pre and a post-developed site bank full volume. So really the simple term is you have to infiltrate on a site now. We've implemented that from 2014. We do recognize, in Washtenaw County, certainly we have a big mismatch of soils. I know the glaciers, of course, came through this area and deposited a whole bunch of varying things throughout the county. So there are sites, and we do test. So part of our infiltration requirement is to do on-site testing before you finish your design. Is if you don't have those type of soils that are nice and sandy and that can infiltrate, you may not have to do it because you can't, but that's where our resiliency comes in. And we require that you add 20% volume to your detention requirements if you cannot infiltrate on a site. So that's kind of been our primary focus, or our thrust in trying to build some climate resiliency, is to work more and more with the infiltration data. And I think I have some here. Let me see if I got it, to see what our success rates have been. All right, so I guess this presentation is older than I thought, but this was a couple of years worth of data, but it kind of gives some trends. Certainly includes Scio Township. We are getting, and this has held true through 2021. We've held over 50% or over half of our sites. We are getting some infiltration on. So we do get infiltration on over half the sites, a little under half the sites, so a little bit less, but still significant in my mind. This is also held true, can meet our standard. So they can infiltrate the first flush, a little, right around 50%. And then about a quarter of those sites, or not a quarter of those sites, I'm sorry, a quarter of all the sites that we implemented this on can infiltrate their entire detention burden in an infiltration standard. So that eliminates a traditional detention basin. And one of the, I know I'm probably going a little long, but I do want to show one photo, and it's from Scio, so somebody might recognize it. This is Jackson Road. So if you're familiar with the watersheds there, this is like the Honey Creek watershed in the Honey Creek area. So north side of Jackson Road, this is the Running Fit site and the AutoZone site. So we're a little west of Zeeb Road. The Running Fit site on the right got built before the standards changed. So they have a traditional detention basin. And then the AutoZone site got built after that, and they were able to use infiltration. There is a pond here, which unfortunately, it's a good thing because it's a flood mitigation pond, but it's bad for my illustration because it's not part of the stormwater management. It's part of the flood management. But to illustrate a little bit better, it shows how this can be a benefit to our developers and our owners in land space usage and costs. Is two sites that are right next door to each other, virtually on the same footprint, you can see that the detention area that one had to put in is over double the area that the infiltration site had to put in. So there was certainly an area savings, earth moving savings, etc., that we were able to implement, or they were able to implement on a site like that. So I know I'm running a little long, so I think I'll skip how we do our infiltration testing, and probably finish on just a couple other things that we're also doing in the county, just so if you want to collaborate or have future presentations on this. We're also doing our home toxics programs. So that's right here in Scio Township on Zeeb Road, because I know a lot of you might see it when we do the collections and collect the home hazardous waste material. We collect, I think it's in the neighborhood of 1 million pounds a year, right out in Scio Township. So just to kind of like to throw that kind of stuff out there as well, because it's something we're also proud of. And also our rain gardens. That certainly ties in a lot with what I do with the rules and the standards. I think we're up to over 500 rain gardens now throughout the county. It's certainly one of those best management practices that we love to implement, and we have found that those have been very successful in all types of soils, even the ones where infiltration might not be really feasible, that the plant roots and the uptake from the plants can certainly aid and supplement what the soils are doing. So I'll kind of end it there. Hopefully I didn't go too far over and wasn't too incoherent here, but so I wanted to thank you guys for inviting us. We love to talk about it, and I'd certainly love to answer any questions that anyone had about it.
Thank you very much, Scott. And so commissioners, some questions. Commissioner Holland.
I was wondering, it looked like there was some interesting stuff on slides 21, 22, and 23. Could we get a real quick, just look at those?
Oh, you absolutely. I'd love to.
Thanks.
Let's see. Share this time. I got it. All right.
Not to make the meeting go any longer, but yeah, it looked like stuff, useful information.
Yeah. I know. I mean, I certainly understand with all these meetings. It's some. I have a little trouble seeing what the interest level is after a few minutes. So, no, this is a great idea. We're, if you're gonna require infiltration, you obviously have to have some way to test it. To say, well, what are you actually infiltrating? So these slides 21, 22, 23 are first part's about infiltration testing. Before an engineer submits a design to us for their stormwater management system, we require, hey, go out, dig some holes, and let's see what infiltrates. And that's exactly what we're looking at here. Is people will take a backhoe or an excavator, have a testing plan to go through their site, and the bigger the site, the more holes you might have to dig. And then they dig down, look for potential stratas of soils to infiltrate, nice sandy material that's not saturated or below the water table. So you can see in the middle one, they've dug down around 4 feet, and then they put tubes in the ground, and the basic premise is you fill them with water and see how fast the water takes to go down, how fast it infiltrates, and you can come up with a rate, like inches per hour is what we use. Couple observations on this that we've come out with is certainly the rainfall patterns in the area have a huge impact on this, not just the water table. This year, I think everyone knows, has been very, very dry. The soils are not saturated in general. They can soak up a lot of water. Last May is a good contrast. We our soils all spring, pretty much throughout the county, were fully saturated. And in May, like mid to late May, over a 3 or 4 day period, I think it was 2 or 3 rainfall events, we got 3 to 4 inches of rain, which is certainly less than 100-year. But because the soils were so saturated, we experienced flooding that you would see with 100-year flooding events. So there's just some observations on the how to do the testing, what we do. And then certainly, I think there's more acceptance of it now, but back in 2014, a lot of developers thought this is going to just be expensive. It's just another standard, another mandate. I don't want to do it. And they didn't want to dig extensively or dig around their site. So I think we've overcome that one now. And then in 23, what was I talking about back then? Oh, that was just to do with our plan review process about how we could facilitate getting to approvals and permits when people were trying to meet our standards. I think some of this is certainly true now as it was then, as we still see a lot of calculation errors, even though these are professional engineers, and I'm one too, so that's my group. And missing information. So yeah, I don't know if you wanted to look at any of the other slides quickly, but yeah.
Thank you.
I think Commissioner Courteau had a question or two.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, well, first of all, thank you for the presentation. It's helpful to know this. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about the differences in assessing stormwater for like a building site versus a road, because some of the issues that we are having lately is stormwater management for roads.
Yeah, we collaborate. I think we collaborate really well with the Road Commission. Also MDOT, we obviously, Michigan Ave and I-94, there's certainly some MDOT throughways in the county. We have an agreement with our road agency about a stormwater management standard, depending on what the type of road improvement is. So these would be applicable to new builds, like new road systems.
Does that include private roads? Because I guess that's our focus is private roads.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't make that clear.
Yeah, private, no, it doesn't. We do when, whether it's a township or a city ordinance extends review privileges to us, or we have outright jurisdiction on a site that has private roads, they are held to our full standards. So it's, as you know, you're putting in pure imperviousness wherever you're putting in roads. So we do require that all of that runoff from the road be collected, directed to treatment, so both quality treatment and flood control treatment, and then discharged to a channel that's adequate to handle it, so you don't have an adverse flooding effect. So in that sense, yes, if we have jurisdiction or extended jurisdiction, they're subject to the same standards that like a building or a private development would have. Yeah.
So I'm sorry, if I could just follow up. So if there's a nearby waterway, is that what would make it within your jurisdiction?
Well, if it would be under our direct jurisdiction, this is for any site, not just the private roads, but any building site. It's under our direct jurisdiction if there's a pre-existing legally established county drain that actually abuts the site or traverses through the site. So if there's a direct discharge to it, or if the water leaves the site directly into a county drain. So that includes, like, you can't build your pipe 1 foot short of the drain and then call it not a direct connection. But if there's a county drain there, we have direct jurisdiction. And then some townships, and Scio has an ordinance too, and there's probably half or so of the townships, they have ordinance which will extend jurisdiction based on, various building standards. So, yeah.
Scott, one other question following up on infiltration. And by the way, I did we were involved with the Humane Society, which had, I believe, was the first infiltration basin in the county, which was about 2007, 2008, I think.
Okay.
But what has come up recently is maintenance of those infiltration basins, and you know, how does enforcement happen, and where do we turn if there are issues with those?
Yeah, I'll admit we struggle with this. Every site plan we approve or issue a permit on, we require a maintenance plan, a perpetual maintenance plan, and that does include the infiltration basins. In a lot of the platted subdivisions and site condos, we also have a mandate that they do post-construction infiltration testing to ensure that it actually infiltrates like it's supposed to post-construction. On sites like those where we're going to establish a county drain, we certainly have the authority to make sure that happens and make sure that they get maintained. I think there certainly is a gap in some of the private developments where we're not seeing that maintenance happen. And I don't know if I have a great mechanism to kind of step into those sites and take corrective action. I mean, we're not a punitive agency by nature. I mean, I'm not going to go and plug up an outlet and say, you're not going to discharge until you fix this. So barring drastic action, a lot of it's sort of cajoling and suggestion and recommendation to get it done.
Other questions for Scott? All right, well, thank you very much. And maybe we'll maybe encourage Evan to record his presentation and make it available, because I think it sounds like it'll be a very interesting one.
Yeah, it's definitely evolving, just like the climate in the news.
Exactly. It was even in the ARP magazine, although they said nothing about fossil fuels. Oh, well. Surprise, surprise. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate the partnership that we have with.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Then we'll continue. Next up is public comment. And you're welcome to stay or go or whatever you'd like, Scott. All right, public comment. At this time, we'll open the meeting for public comment. We'll start with online participants. You can indicate that you would like to provide a comment by clicking the raise your hand button found at the bottom of your screen if joining by computer, or the top of your screen if joining by tablet. Your microphone will be enabled one at a time until all online participants have had the opportunity to speak once. When you are unmuted by the host, you will see a dialog box that says stay muted or unmute myself. Choose unmute myself if you wish to speak. Second, anyone who has phoned in will have the opportunity to speak. I will ask for all callers to speak by raising their hands by pressing *9 and then pressing *6 to unmute. Callers must take turns until each call wishing to speak has had the opportunity to speak once. Comments must be limited to 3 minutes. Just basically, I don't expect any disruptive behavior, but we do have a way of warning with disruptive behavior. So with that, I'll ask for a motion to open public comment.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Hyde, seconded by Commissioner Courteau. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Okay, Holland,
Yes.
Moore,
She
Moore. Let's see.
may have.
Okay, we'll move on then. Sharma,
Yes.
Courteau,
Yes.
Hyde,
Yes.
Cheng, yes. Culbertson.
Yes. All right.
Good.
Public comment is opened at 8:09. Laura, do we have anyone who wishes to address the Planning Commission?
Yes, we currently have two hands raised. Bonnie Gorikin was first, so I'm going to allow her to talk.
Right.
Hi, Bonnie, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Bonnie Gorishin. I've talked to you before about the private road variance for East Delhi. I wanted to thank the Planning Commission for your careful consideration of the issues we raised concerning the road, particularly the willingness to reduce the impact by proposing the Class C alternative, which was helpful. I also wanted to thank Commissioners Hyde, Courteau, and more for visiting the site. Right now, I wanted to bring to your attention the minutes of the May 24th meeting. I reviewed the minutes and I reviewed the audio recording of the meeting, and I believe that there was a mistake in the minutes. I wanted to mention it because I'm not sure. I'm confident that you all would probably catch it, but just to be sure, I wanted to raise an issue with item 4 of the conditions. Item 4 says that based on the plans submitted, that a maximum of 9 new home sites be provided access to the new private road, never to exceed 9 homes. I believe that what Commissioner Holland had said was a maximum of 6 new home sites, not 9. If you'll recall, we're dealing with here is we have 3 existing homes on the driveway. We have 3 unimproved lots on the easement, and we're going to have 3 new residences that were proposed for the far east side of the easement for a total of 9 lots altogether, 3 existing and 6 new potential home sites. So that's my comments, and I hope that you'll consider that when you're thinking about approving the minutes. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Charles Nielsen, I'm going to allow him to talk.
And Charles, you do need to unmute yourself.
There is another, why don't we come back to Charles, maybe? Rob Pattinson, I'm going to allow him to talk.
Oh, I think Charles just unmuted.
Yeah, well, no, my whole screen froze up. I couldn't unmute, but it looks like I'm working now. Thanks for your patience. Charles Nielsen, 6655 Jackson Road. I am a member of Michigan Dark Skies and also president of the University Lowbrow Astronomers. So you're probably going to guess I'm going to comment on Sally Oe's presentation. I actually wanted to point out 3 beautiful examples that we have here in Scio Township that really demonstrate many of the things that she was talking about. Fortunately, they're not bad examples. They're a good example, a better example, and a really, really good example. But it gives you an idea of lighting differences and some things to consider going forward as part of the planning process. The first example would be Meyer, which was built a number of years ago, and they were in compliance with our lighting ordinance. And what I would ask, of course, you have to go out kind of late these days to observe this, but to just go out when it is fully dark and take a look at how well the parking lot and people are illuminated in the parking lot, and then look how dark the sky is above the light fixtures. Then if you cross the street and go a little further west down to Lowe's, you'll see an even better example yet. I also believe that Lowe's lowers their lighting, or perhaps they cut some of the lighting off after they're closed, because if you go by there late enough at night, it's amazing. You can just kind of see the parking lot, you can see the front of the store, but it's actually at a very comfortable lighting level and not obnoxious at all. And then a great example was Menards. Not only do they have really good fixtures, they're a little bit lower to the ground, which is also an advantage. And when they close, and it is about a half hour after they close, they turn those lights off completely. And to the best of my knowledge, this has not created a problem. I haven't heard of any crime erupting because they've got a dark parking lot there. And no doubt they're saving some power, which helps everybody. So just wanted to point that out. And if you have the opportunity to observe these three areas, I think, again, examples of some of the principles that Sally was speaking about. So I appreciate your time and thank you very much for all you do for the township. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nielsen. And thanks for your work as well. All right, our next speaker.
Rob Pattinson. I've already let him speak. So Rob, go ahead and unmute.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say thank you to the Planning Commission for the educational aspect of these two presentations. That was unusual for the planning commissions that I've seen, and I really appreciate it. It was very well done, so thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else raising their hand or via phone?
Yes, Jonathan Greenberg. I'm going to allow him to talk.
Hi, thank you. I just want to echo Rob's comments as well. Very much enjoyed the presentation by Professor Sally. Thank you.
Right. Anyone else?
There is no one else with their hand raised at this time.
Okay, we'll wait about 30 seconds. Okay, last check. Looks all clear to me. All right, then I'll entertain a motion to close public comment. Moved by Commissioner Hyde, support by Commissioner Sharma.
Sharma.
All right, any other discussion? Roll call vote, please. Secretary Cheng.
Holland.
Yes.
Moore. You're on mute. Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay, yes.
Sharma.
Yes.
Courteau.
Yes.
Hyde.
Yes.
Cheng. Yes. Culbertson.
Yes.
All right, it's closed.
All right. All right, moving on. Laura, would you like to report a bit on the master plan and the master plan timeline?
Sure. So the Township Board last week, Tuesday, allowed for or approved the distribution of the master plan to adjacent communities and to put on the website for a resident comment. Doug is on vacation, so I am working to get that accomplished this week. However, he will be back on the 21st. So my goal is as soon as possible, but with some of the time constraints I'm working with currently, it may be first thing next week. So bear with me, but that's the next thing that we're going to be doing for the master plan. As I said, this will start, this distribution process starts the 63-day public comment period that we're required by the Planning Enabling Act to conduct. After the 63-day public comment period, we intend to have a public hearing here at the Planning Commission, and that will be in August. We will provide notice of that hearing during that 63-day notification period. We're not going to wait for it to end and then have our notification period. So we're trying not to extend it any longer than we have to. And at that time, we'll hold a public hearing and we'll accept comments. much like the ones we've already received via communications, like the correspondence you had today in your packet. And so I'm sure we'll be receiving more of those within our 63-day comment period. And as Jan said, I'm sorry, when Doug gets back, you'll talk about how you're going to organize those and talk about those as the public comment period progresses. After the public hearing, there probably will be some additional modifications that you'd like to make to the master plan. So we'll do that work to get those completed as quickly as possible. And then we'll be looking for an adoption of the plan. So we're getting really close to what has been a much longer process than we had originally anticipated when we started this in 2019. So just along with everything else in 2020, things just seemed to, time stood still a little bit. So we're excited to be in the home stretch, and we hope that you are too. And we're looking forward to completing the document.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And I do believe, do you know if there was an article that was submitted for the newsletter as well?
There was, yes. It will be in the newsletter.
Great. So we're trying to, get the word out for people to take a look. So I would appreciate planning commission members also, in the folks that you run into, or if you have a network of people that you can alert to the draft plan, master plan being out there, that would be great, because I think the more people that we can get to take a look at it, that would be good. Does that also go to like Huron River Watershed Council, the Water Resources Group, and
it goes to all the county agencies. I don't know that it goes to the Watershed Council. We may have provided it to them just as a courtesy before. I'll have to double check. It goes to the same people that we sent our letter of intent to, which is all adjacent municipalities, the county agencies, the SEMCOG, and then also utilities and railroads.
Okay. So Bob, as our rep to Huron River Watershed Council, you can confirm that it gets to them. That'd be great. All right. Any other questions for Laura on the master plan timeline? All right. The Environmental Task Force recruitment, just a report. We have 2 interns that are working. They've already completed some of their research, and Commissioner Courteau, Trustee Vogel, and I have been meeting with them weekly. We have been emailing, and there's an article in the newsletter coming out regarding the task force application process. And I want to thank Commissioner Holland for sending. Dana did call me, Darty. So I've heard 5 people so far saying they are interested. However, I have not received any formal, this is my resume and this is my statement of interest. So those are due by July 12th. And that has to do with the newsletter timing. And we are looking for a variety of people that have a passion, interest. I also did send, be nice to have a couple of youth members as well. So if you have networks within the township, know folks that are homeowners association, involved in their homeowners association, maybe church networks, houses of worship networks, school networks, do try and spread the word wide, because that's the way that we'll get a wide variety of interest. Commissioner Courteau, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think you covered it. Thank you. We're just really hoping to get diverse representatives in terms of age groups, in terms of diversity of the township, and then skills, interest, experience, so we can, bring the greatest range of interests and perspectives possible.
And Commissioner Hyde has expressed his interest, and so there's room for at least another or two Planning Commission members that would like to participate in it. And so I encourage you to think about that. Then the other thing I wanted to briefly talk about is I'd like to develop our zoning ordinance amendment, or kind of start putting together a list of things that we would like the ZOA to take a look at, and or Carlisle Wortman to take a look at as far as our ordinances. And as we go through the master plan and our final review, we can add to that list. But I think that would be, Laura, have you guys started compiling anything yet that you know of?
I have a short list from a little while ago. So yeah, we continue to add to the list as we find things.
Okay. So if there are some things that the commissioners have identified in their review of the master plan or dealing with ordinances that they want to bring up, what I'd like to do is kind of keep this as a kind of an agenda item so that we can continue to add to that list as we're moving along. So, Commissioner Courteau?
Are you going to consider stormwater ordinances to see whether our existing ordinance is enough, or given the current set of issues around maintenance and testing of stormwater system performance, whether there's more that's needed? Is that on the list?
We can put it on the list. I think that's out of my comfort zone, but OHM definitely can help us with that. And that may be more of a general law ordinance than a zoning ordinance, which we also can talk about. But we have to I think the zoning ordinance committee really focuses on zoning ordinances. So this may be just a tiny bit outside of the ZOA's capacity. But definitely if that's something that we want to look at, we can have a conversation with OHM and see their thoughts, get their thoughts.
Chair Culbertson, I'm just thinking in the wake of the discussion about the stormwater system that we've been communicating about, isn't that under zoning? Because that was a requirement of the site plan.
It is right now. It's under jurisdiction of the water resources. Okay. We do get a report on every single site plan from the Water Resources Commission, unless there isn't an outlet to a drain, I guess.
In most cases, though, I think our ordinance mirrors the Washtenaw County standards. Mm-hmm. So OHM is reviewing them, and then it's going to the county for their permitting review. In most cases, most everything is under the jurisdiction of the water resources. In very few instances do they not review any new development on a site.
So you just want to make sure that our ordinances are up to date and taking a look at making sure they're keeping up to the increase in rainfall and best management practices that we can, as far as the lid.
That, but also the ongoing maintenance, and whether there's a fund set aside for maintenance and testing if there's an issue. What
are you thinking of suggesting an escrow for?
Well, I was looking through that ordinance language, and it sounded to me as though that whoever had the site plan was required to have the testing be done if it were needed. We can continue this discussion offline. I just thought there were some zoning ordinance questions that had been raised in that discussion, so I just wanted to get that on the list.
All right, good. And I think the other thing that belongs on the list is our noise ordinance, because the observations on the Heron Farm site really brought up the issue that probably our 65 dBA is something that we need to look at. That might be more of an urban issue. Yes, Commissioner Hyde.
And while we're on the list that may not be zoning related totally, enforcement ought to be something that we discuss too on all of our ordinances.
Okay. Other commissioners? And I think our tree preservation it probably deserves looking as well. And I know Ann Arbor has a new one that they've been looking at that we might want to take a look at. That adds the heritage tree as opposed to a landmark tree as even a more valuable tree, and looking more at the overall woodland preservation too. Okay. And so as we're going through this, I want to just keep that running list because it'll be there'll be a good amount of work ahead. Jay's eyes just got really big. All right. Then we'll just move to reports, commission activity, and we'll start with Carlisle Wortman.
We are continuing to receive a lot of development reviews every day. So we have a rezoning that's going to come before you, a conditional use that's going to come before you in the next month. Yeah, just there's a lot going on in addition to the master plan. So we'll be keeping you busy with development.
Okay. Great. And I think the chair report was basically the environmental task force and the pre-application meetings. And if you could, the pre-application meetings, there was one that was on site. I don't know if I guess we're encouraging them to remain virtual. Is that correct, Laura?
I don't know that we're encouraging them to remain virtual. We're kind of giving them the option whether they want to come to the township or be virtual. In a lot of cases, people are out of town and the virtual option is a good tool. But I also had a concept meeting. They insisted that they wanted to come to the township. So it's really, I think we're just using it as a preference for the applicant and what they prefer.
Okay, and I think we did get a communication from the Suburban folks that it's evidently Suburban was sold, and so they're kind of on hold at this point. Just as an update. BOT. You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm glad you mentioned the noise ordinance. At the last meeting, the BOT considered revisions to the agricultural commercial tourism section, which the Planning Commission has recently been working on with regards to the Heron Farms project. The Planning Commission had previously, the previous Planning Commission had previously recommended changes to the BOT, I think back in either 2019 or early in 2020, but the previous board had not actually on it. Planner Lewan had done an additional review with language to better define structures as permanent fixed buildings with walls and a foundation, and to specify the doors must be closed before music can play. However, Trustee Knoll had concerns that the revised ordinance language did not fully incorporate Mr. Lewan's recommendations and that there were further concerns about noise. So I suggested that based on what we had heard from the acoustic consultant during the May sound test at Heron Farms, as well as from the questions raised by the other acoustic consultant who reviewed that report, that it seemed like our noise ordinance needs review and revision, and that this should go hand in hand with the agricultural commercial tourism ordinance revision. So Trustee Knoll and I will work together with Planner Lewan and others to update the noise ordinance. And of course, we would welcome any input and feedback back from any of the commissioners. In addition to that, the BOT will be reviving the Local Roads Advisory Committee to better consider road projects funded by neighborhood or township-led special assessment districts, SADs. Although the Advisory Commission to the Washtenaw County Road Commission, which Commissioner Sharma had volunteered to serve on, that commission is no longer active, but I believe that Commissioner Sharma, who would be asked to serve on this local roads committee, if you're willing. And I really do think it will be helpful for the planning commission to have an up-to-date perspective on roads. So I think that's what I have from the BOT, and then the LPC has not met since our last meeting. It will be meeting this week, so I have no further update, but we'll have an update for next meeting.
Okay. And I was reminded, I wasn't sure we had tabled the special events ordinance, and I'm not sure who's in charge of that. That had to do with, numbers of people and so forth. And I'm not sure whose lap that currently rests in. Is that the plan?
My memory was that was in Mr. Lewan's court, because he was going to continue to look at some refinements of numbers and so on. But we would have to double check the minutes.
Good. All right, ZBA, we did meet. There was a request, and this has to do with our sign ordinance, and we may want to do some review on the sign ordinance, but it was, again, a sign that increasing the amount of signage available for a business along Jackson Road where they have double frontage. However, in this particular case, there had already been added signage appropriated for that building, and so the request was denied. And we'll be meeting again on Thursday. DDA.
DDA has not met. We don't meet for another month. We're only meeting every other month at this point. Does anyone have any questions regarding DDA and what it does and how it works?
Yeah, briefly, if you don't mind.
Well, DDA was established. It was under a state law. In Scio Township, it's been used to develop the sewer system, and basically the intent is to eliminate blight in your community, at which time 30 some years ago, Scio Township was kind of known for having a lot of pole barns, did not have a sewer system, did not have a water system, many pole barns, and it was somewhat rural. And DDA has sold bonds to help develop the boulevard and other projects. The bonds are paid for by getting what's called a tax incremental revenue, which if you take a baseline, this is the simple way I understand it. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but if you take a baseline of what the property values were at the time DDA was established, whatever the increase is, DDA gets a percentage of the increase on the tax revenue on that parcel, and that changes and it varies depending on the school district and et cetera. DDA in Scio Township, I believe, expires in 2029 if we don't extend it, and because I believe that's when our bonds are done. But they're currently looking into the possibility of extending. Is that enough? Thanks.
Thank you. Then ZOA, Commissioner Cheng.
Nothing to report.
Making that list.
Yep.
Parks and Rec, Commissioner Hyde.
Okay. Well, the biggest thing to report is that there has been a rookery, a great blue heron rookery identified in one of our preserves. And right now there's a joint Parks and Planning Commission and Board of Trustees Committee looking into what should be done and what they recommend being done to allow the herons to flourish there. And I guess as Commissioner Culbertson pointed out to me, that right now it's not being made public as to where it is because it is mating season, but we'll keep the public updated as we progress.
Okay, thank you. So, and that's due to some of the LPC inventory being done by some of the interns.
Yes.
So maybe there'll be some other interesting discoveries of unique habitats that we have in Scio. And obviously, we're trying to engage a biologist and look at the impacts because there are some developments that are proposed relatively close to the that particular rookery. So anyway, we get to learn about rookeries. Isn't that fun?
That's right. Exciting.
And just as a footnote, what a great accomplishment for land preservation to have put together the land that these birds are nesting on. So, I mean, we were really preserving worthwhile habitat. So we're proud.
Great. TAP. Commissioner Cheng.
Yep, TAP met last Wednesday. For the most part, discussed the connections along Zeeb Road. I believe it's phase 3 that looks like it's going to be hopefully completed this year. So that's exciting. And we also looked at, future funding sources. And we also discussed the Woodview PUD. I believe that's moving forward with the proposed path that we had suggested that was approved probably a couple months ago.
Okay, great. Huron River Watershed Council, Commissioner Hyde.
Well, there's nothing new to report there, but as you pointed out, Commissioner, I will be making sure that they get the master plan or get notified when it's released and on the website so that we can have them take a look at that too.
Great. Then we'll go ahead and we have 2 sets of minutes. We have the minutes of our special meeting that was out at Heron Farm and also the minutes of our 5/24 meeting. So we'll start with 5/12. We did table those minutes and I want to thank Commissioner Courteau for her notes on the decibel level readings. Shall we go ahead and take a look at those? Are there commissioners that any additions or corrections to the, I guess I need a motion first to approve the minutes of our May 12th, 2021 special meeting. Moved by Commissioner Hyde, support by Commissioner Sharma. Discussion. Commissioner Courteau.
I'm so sorry. I have not been able to locate those meetings. I see the May 24th, sorry, those minutes. I see the May 24th minutes, but did those come in a different place?
No, they should. I think that I wanted to make sure I think they were just added to the packet today.
Maybe I have the wrong version of the packet.
I think mine came in an email from Fran.
Oh, that's right. That's
Mhm.
okay. You're right. Yep. I thought she put them back up though.
Okay, I'm very sorry. Oh, okay. I see them now.
Just want to see, and I'm going on the and they are up on the website as well. So I think they were added later on, maybe after you downloaded your packet.
It must be.
Mm-hmm. But they are on the website right now.
Okay, I see them now. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And basically what was added under new business, we added the test location and the readings that we had.
Got it. Thank you.
Right. And I added the note about the, commented on the 65 dBA seemed high. So that wouldn't be forgotten. All right. Any other additions or revisions to the 5/12/2021 minutes? All right, seeing none, roll call vote, please. Commissioner Cheng. Oh, Commissioner Courteau.
I'm so sorry. I thought I added a couple of names of public who gave comments. I believe that during the public comment, Jillian Carey gave a comment.
She did.
And I believe also Jeff Harshey.
Yes, public comment, we should add Jeff Harshey and who was it was
Jillian Carey.
Gary. Yeah. And I believe we have both of their addresses from a prior meeting. Okay. Then will a friendly amendment to the motion to add those two individuals that made public comment.
That's
I make
good.
that.
All right. Then we'll move ahead with our roll call vote. And I just lost everybody, sorry.
Okay. Holland,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Sharma,
Yes.
Courteau,
Yes.
Hyde,
Yes.
Cheng, yes. Culbertson,
Yes.
okay, passes.
All right, moving to our 5/24 minutes.
And of course, you got the page 5, note number 4.
Yeah, that a maximum of 6 new, never to exceed 9 homes. 6 new home sites. So it should be 6 new and never to exceed 9 is fine total. Mhm. So we could add total after 9 and it should say 6 new home sites as opposed to 9. Oh, I do need a motion before we discuss.
I think we need a comma after in number 5. The attorney's opinion indicate that the easement cannot be improved as requested, comma, the subject variance shall be rescinded.
Thank you.
And I'm just kind of curious as to when that attorney opinion, is that being requested again, or are we never going to get an attorney opinion?
We did get an attorney opinion.
Okay, and it's affirmative?
Mhm.
Okay.
It was, yeah, as affirmative as an attorney opinion can. I guess would be my comment. Commission, I'm sorry.
I have to say, I did have a reaction to that opinion. I was like, what was the advice? But anyway.
Commissioner Courteau.
Just a typo in point number 1, then it should be non-conforming. There's an extra N in there.
Yes. Other comments? All right. I'll entertain a motion to approve the 5/24 and 2021 minutes.
So
Their support as amended is the motion.
Second.
Support Commissioner Holland. Any other revisions or additions? All right, roll call vote.
Okay. Holland,
Yes.
Moore,
yes.
Sharma,
Yes.
Courteau,
Yes.
Hyde,
Yes.
Cheng, yes. Culbertson.
Yes.
Okay. Motion carried.
All right, great. Are there any other announcements or items of business that commissioners want to note? Commissioner Courteau.
Just a brief question. Would we be able to get a comment or a copy? I should have asked this when he was still on, from the Assistant Water Resources Commissioner of his presentation.
Presentation. I will ask him for it. Yeah, and I'll also ask them if they'll send us a link to a recording, or maybe we can have Commissioner Evan Pratt give a full presentation. Maybe it's to the Environmental Task Force or something.
That will be very useful, thinking about changing rainfall patterns and their demands.
Yeah. And I want to thank the commissioners for going ahead and having this meeting. I think it was good for some educational purposes, and also keeping our meeting minutes rolling so that the trustees, things can move into the trustee realm. So thank you. And Laura, it was good to see you.
Hey, nice presentations. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Yep, I really enjoyed that.
Very helpful.
Good. Great. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Moore, support by Commissioner Holland. Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Okay. Holland,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Sharma,
Yes.
Courteau,
Yes.
Hyde,
Yes.
Cheng, yes. Culbertson.
Yes.
We're
All right.
adjourned.
Thank you. I really appreciate everyone's
Recording stopped.